lives in the awareness that no matter how difficult their situation might be, a greater good is continually seeking to express in their life. Now, this is especially important to realize at this time because the human tendency is to think, well, things may get better, they may get worse. We had an example this past week when Lenore was with her online Boxing for Parkinson's group, where there were perhaps 15 or so people, and the coach was taking them through the various parts. And when she was about halfway through, Lenore found she was getting pretty warm, so she opened the door wall in the living room to get a little air. Well, Coach Suzanne is a very alive, very vocal person. And she was whooping and hollering, and she was saying, right jab, left hook. And she was shouting really loud. Well, when the whole thing was over, Lenore turned it off, and she heard a neighbor say, well, that's what happens when the young people move in. Well, I've never thought of myself as being all that young, but whatever they think is okay with me. I thought it was hilarious. Lenore didn't think it was quite so much so. During this pandemic, more than ever, human challenges can loom large. A loved one may become ill. You yourself may be called upon to risk your well-being. Financial issues may become distressing. The worst part is when you can't imagine a way out. And why not? Who says we must strenuously try to rise and walk again? The answer is every cell in your body is programmed to fight for life. There is a greatness built into you. And God has an insatiable desire for a greater good to be your experience. In Milan, Italy, there is an impressive cathedral. And to the right of the door, there is a sculptured bouquet of roses with the statement underneath it, all that pleases us is only for a moment. To the left of the door is a cross of thorns with the statement under it, all troubles us only for a moment. And over the top of the door, nothing is important but that which is eternal. You are connected to an eternal presence and power. God is more powerful than any of your temporal problems. Scripture makes clear that God is at work in you and that you will never be happy or peaceful or content until you let God take charge of your life. In 1 John is the statement, greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. And in Matthew 6, Jesus makes clear that, yes, you are to give up your worry, your concern, your frustration. And Jesus, in essence, states, God knows that you need food, you need things to drink, you need clothes to wear, and goes on to be quoted, strive first for the kingdom of God and God's righteousness, and all these things will be yours. Many of us will remember the actress Betty Hutton, who was performing back in the 30s and the 40s and even beyond. Well, there was a time when Betty Hutton came to be starring in a Broadway show, Annie, back in 1980. And at that time, for her, it was a comeback because she had been through all kinds of issues in her life. She had experienced career failure, family breakdown, a bout with alcoholism, bankruptcy. She'd even tried to commit suicide at one point. In the program of that Broadway production, there were all kinds of statements about a large cast. But underneath Betty Hutton's picture, there were just 5 words. And people in the audience didn't seem to mind at all that when she came on stage, applause erupted for several minutes as Betty Hutton wiped the tear from her eye, because under her picture were just 5 words: I'm back, thanks to God. While this spiritual principle that things are always trying to get better for you is ever at work, to maximize its benefit requires your acceptance of that, your belief in that, your expectation of that, and your gratitude for that. Sometime back, there was a woman and her husband who were overjoyed because they had a new baby on the way. They had explained this to their 3-year-old, Michael was his name. And Michael even sat next to his mother during her pregnancy and would sing songs to this baby that was in her stomach. Well, during delivery, there were some serious complications, and the baby was rushed to another hospital where there was a neonatal intensive care unit. The baby remained in very serious condition. And meanwhile, Michael asked to be able to sing to his sister. He wanted to see her. Well, the rules were that no children were allowed in the intensive care unit, so they weren't able to take him. But the little girl got worse. And as they entered the 2nd week, the doctors told Karen and her husband that it looked like she was not going to be able to make it. It looked like they would be performing a funeral for her before the week was out. Michael kept asking to see her. The hospital made it clear, no children allowed. Karen thought he may never see her alive. She confronted the head nurse and took her son into the intensive care unit and said he will leave after he sings to his sister. Michael went in, gazed down on his little sister, who was losing the fight for her life, and he began to sing. He began to sing a song that Lenore has sung often to each of our grandchildren. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. Karen looked down. The little girl seemed to be responding. He said, Michael, keep singing. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The baby's pulse calmed. Her breathing became steady. She became restful. And there were tears on the face of the head nurse. The next day, that little girl went home. Woman's Day magazine called it the miracle of a brother's song. The staff in the hospital called it a miracle. Karen has always considered it God's miracle of love. We all live with the handicap of being human, which means we all have limitations. But each of us is able to use this so-called handicap by which to release your imprisoned splendor, your inherent greatness. Life never forces you into a position where you cannot determine how you will receive some experience. The option is always there. For instance, many people will say they sincerely believe that I have no choice in the matter. I have to take this in a negative way, but there is always a choice. You may refuse to accept the choice, but that doesn't mean the option wasn't there. Let me read you a letter from a woman who wrote, "A few years ago, I accepted a position in England. In preparation for leaving, I quit my current job, moved out of my house, and got rid of my car. I withdrew my savings to handle outstanding debts and allowed an ailing relationship a decent burial. With just 2 suitcases, I was primed and simply awaiting my departure date from my new British employer. Instead of a working permit, I received a telegram. The whole thing was off. Once the initial shock was over, I remembered that my heart's desire has always been to become a physician. The only way God would ever get me to do it was to help me clear away a few minor details: house, car, relationship, furniture, money, job. The initial shock lasted 24 hours, and I was in medical school 4 months later. I will be an MD on May 22nd. Thinking back on it, I never would have done it if those things hadn't happened. My friends and family watched with awe as God weaved magic through the life of a 31-year-old woman who lost everything but went on to live out a dream. Yay for me." That's a nice letter, isn't it? She could have seen her employer and others as betrayers and victimizers. She would have been justified. But somehow, when all the dust settled, she realized that they were God's agents. We are, each one of us, spiritual beings having a human experience. So this dualism is our nature. The struggle goes on in everyone, but peace and joy are achieved when you allow the guidance to lead your way. We had a marvelous example of that in our own family. some 25 years ago, a quarter century now, when Lenore and I were headed to Texas, to Austin, to start up a church there. Our son, Larry, agreed to take some vacation time and come help us out. Now, Larry right now is a marvelous wildlife artist who lives in Colorado. But at that time, he was working in a job in Detroit. And he took some vacation time in order to come down and help us, because Larry is not only a marvelous artist, but he's also great with his hands. He's able to build things and fix things. So he came down and spent several days with us. And in doing so, helped us to build cabinets in the garage and to get settled. Well, during that time there, when Larry and I went out for lunch one day, Lenore was doing something else, and he and I sat there, and I remember him saying, about 6 months ago, I had a girlfriend, and the two of us broke up. And I'm just wondering, I haven't been seeing anyone since that time. I'm just wondering if it might make sense for me when I get back to Michigan to look her up and see if that might go somewhere. And I recall saying, Larry, I just absolutely know that the guidance will lead you just where you are intended to be. Well, Lenore had told a woman who was to become one of the leaders in the church, along with her husband, about Larry's painting. And this woman by the name of Betty and her husband Jim thought maybe it would be nice for Larry to paint their dog and cat. And so she invited Larry to come over so that she could see some of his artwork. Now, Larry was intended to be leaving on a plane the next day, but we said, Larry, why don't we're having such a good time. We appreciate so much your being here. Could you extend it a couple days? So he stayed a couple more days. And during that time, he went over to see Betty, and he took his paintings. And while they were there, Betty commissioned him to do a painting of their pets. And she said, it's at lunchtime coming up. Our daughter just got in yesterday from California. She's a student out there. And how would you like to come join us for lunch? Larry said, that'd be great. Well, they went to lunch, and Betty later said, it was like I wasn't there. Larry and Kathy connected in such a way that it was magic. Now, Kathy was studying to become a teacher, and since that time has gone on to become a licensed medical assistant. And the next day, they were together, and they went out for a movie while the rest of us were having a meeting about the church. Thereafter, Larry soon left on a plane, went back to Michigan, and I called to talk to Jim, Kathy's dad, who was to become the president of the board of the church. And Kathy answered the phone, and I said, Kathy, I wanted your dad, but let me tell you, Larry told me how special it was that he met you yesterday. And she said, I know, he's on the other line right now. Well, right then, I had a clue that this might go somewhere. And sure enough, 2 years later, Lenore and I performed their wedding on a riverside in Austin. And now, Michael, their 20-year-old, is an accomplished musician in college, and their daughter, Isabella, next year, next month, is to become a teenager. And many of you have heard me talk about Isabella because there have been so many Isabella stories, including one a couple of years ago when Lenore was out visiting them in Colorado. And Isabella said, "Grandma, you made a great son." Not only is a greater good seeking to happen for you, but also it is seeking to happen within you. And this can be despite the most imposing obstacles we might imagine. I was listening recently to a television series by Ken Burns on the Roosevelts. And it described how Franklin Delano Roosevelt, at the age of 39, came down with polio. Up until that time, he had been extremely active, physically active in all kinds of ways, had been involved in politics and was on the move. And then when he contracted polio, for the next several years, he was hardly able to get out of bed. And as a matter of fact, for the rest of his life, he was never able to support his weight without assistance, or to take steps and to walk without someone at his side guiding him. And yet, a few years later, in 1928, he became elected the governor of New York, having visited and campaigned in every single county in the state, and 4 years later became the President of the United States, leading this country through the worst depression in its history and through the Second World War. This greater good is not only seeking to be in and for every single person, it's also active and alive within the world as a whole. We need only look back on how life was centuries ago. Do you suppose at that time anyone could foresee the possibilities? How the standard of living would evolve? How the opportunities for food and the abundance of food available could come about? How people might be able to travel through planes, even into space? How communications might be such as what we're experiencing right now? How the lifespan would increase from 20 to 30 years centuries ago to 2 or 3 times that now. How health conditions have improved. When you reflect on this, the restrictions imposed by the current virus don't seem quite so overwhelming. There is, within our heart of hearts, a sacred calling from the divine. There is a call within us all to go into the undiscovered regions of our soul and to become more of ourselves, our real selves, our spiritual selves. There is a call to come out of self-centered, superficial living and to feel ourselves a part of something vast and significant. That call is within us all. It is the call of something greater trying to happen within us and for us. It is the call of God. And as we answer that call and stop holding back on our relationship with God, but rather reaching out to God and asking God, please take over my life. Give me the guidance and the direction that will lift me and sustain me. As we begin to hear it and to feel it and to live it, we will experience more life, more love, more power and joy and harmony than we ever imagined possible. Will you pray with me? Dear God, we are so grateful for your loving presence that lives within us, that lifts us, that is always leading us in the direction of our greater good. We are so grateful for your energy, your spirit, alive within us and every other person. And we say, thank you, dear Lord. Truly we are grateful. Truly we are blessed. And so it is. Amen. And we are grateful that you have joined us this morning. And we want to take this time to let you know that we understand that many people have been experiencing financial difficulty during this time. And for those of you who are able, and only if you are able, to provide a gift, a love offering to the church, we would be most appreciative of your doing so. And in order to do so, you may check out the slide that is in front of you and to provide a gift to www.slctroy.com/give. And this is a very safe website in which you can provide your credit card number and know that it will be secure. Or you may send your gift by mail, a check, to 41340 Fox Run Road, number 106, Novi, Michigan, 48377. And of course, at any time you can send, just give a call to the church and to my cell phone, which is 248-925-6214. We also want to welcome any new persons who are watching us for the first time or one of your first times. And if you would like to continue to receive emails to be aware of upcoming services and programs, you may send that to what is shown on the screen, which is that address that allows you to register to receive future emails. Or you can just send it to me by email at the church email, and we'll see that you are included. And if you happen to have a prayer request, if you have anyone in your family, loved ones, friends, that you would like to see embraced in prayer, we have more than 30 members of the prayer team who would be delighted to pray with you, and your prayers are at the same time sent on to Silent Unity at Unity Village, where they will be prayed over for the next 30 days. And if you want to do that, either call me on the phone or send it the email in, and please today by this evening, and we'll get that being prayed over by the prayer team. Also, this coming Wednesday, we have a Wednesday evening prayer service, and you may be on the lookout in your email to receive the information on how to tune in to that Wednesday service at 7 o'clock when we are able to connect via Zoom. Well, at this time, we invite you to join together in our peace song, and following that, the benediction.
peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as creator, family all are we. Let me walk with my family in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow, to take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
And now as you go forth, know that the light of God surrounds you, the love of God enfolds you.
The Lord bless thee and keep thee.
The power of God protects you.
The Lord make his face to shine upon thee, and be gracious unto thee.
The presence of God watches over you.
The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee, and grant thee peace.
Wherever you are, God is.
Amen. Amen.
Go your way rejoicing. All is truly well.